The world of DC is one where heroes always come out on top, where truth and justice can always lead people to a better tomorrow no matter if the day looks bleak. What happens though when a hero who's paved his way in lies and blood enters the scene? Here's what would happen if Invincible's own Omni-man existed within the DC universe. First things first though, Robert Kirkman's Invincible universe focuses on a plethora of original superheroes and villains in a brand new world that he played in for about 140 issues. One of those chief characters was Nolan Grayson, the hero known as Omni-man. Born on the dominating planet Viltrum, Nolan was sent to Earth to integrate himself with the species and father a child.
We need to get Earth ready to join the Viltrum Empire.
Eventually, Nolan was to turn on Earth and conquer it for the Viltrum Empire. That failed when his son made him realize he had grown to love Earth and its people, the life he had built, and everything that it had given him. Going on to enjoy a character arc that involved him taking his place as the ruler of Viltrum and eventually his death, Omni-man was a well-rounded character that saw a wonderful character arc. The question asked though is, what if Omni-man was in the DC universe instead? Would he see a similar story arc? Could Nolan contend in a world where folks like Darkseid and Doomsday are out in the world? Maybe his life would see drastic differences. I intend to answer all of that. The world of DC is filled with decades worth of heroes and villains that go from Earth and through the cosmos, so already Omni-man and his planet Viltrum would fit in just fine. He would join a universe that is home to the likes of Oa, Thanagar, Ron, and even locations like New Genesis and Apocalypse, so his alien species has a place in this world DC has seen continuity bending events, crisis small and large, and is overly a very storied universe for Omni-man to get the opportunity to play in.
He's found us.
Even beings from the planet Krypton with its advanced technologies, as well as planet Daxam with their similar setup, mean that Nolan and who he is could easily fit right into the lore. Viltrum could have a dominating presence like Warworld, or be a technological powerhouse like Krypton, allowing Nolan the chance to exist in DC seamlessly because, let's face it, he can fit right in. Krypton sent Superman to Earth, John Jones of Mars has come to Earth, and everyone from Starfire to Hawkman even is an alien, so Omni-man going to Earth could work out. The point I gotta ask though is, how would his arrival change compared to his time in Invincible? Off the bat, the arrival of Nolan Grayson would be a slightly more complicated deal, no matter where we place things on the timeline. DC Comics is a constantly running entity, so their timeline is what's referred to as sliding. Dates and time shift around so that someone like Damian Wayne can still be in his early teens over a decade after being introduced, or so Batman can still be in his 40s and would now canonically be a child in the 80s.
I'd like to hear that call. Hello, police? My son stole the Batmobile.
Invincible as a comic is over, Nolan arrived on Earth in the 1980s, and it will forever stay that way. In the DC universe as we currently know it, Nolan would have his timeline shifted to an arrival in the implicit early 2000s to fit in with the DC's modern era. Nolan would arrive on Earth just as Bruce Wayne donned the cowl and purple gloves to be Batman in his 0 year, as well being around to see a young Clark Kent take to the skies as Superman. Unlike the Invincible universe, Nolan's arrival wouldn't be as cut and dry in the DC universe. Assuming Viltrum is copied and pasted into the universe to justify Nolan's existence, their role as a tyrannical survival of the fittest society wouldn't be as dominant. It would still be expansive with various different alien species, so people would know that Viltrum is really like. Nolan's arrival would have to be even more quiet to avoid the likes of the Guardians of OA and the Green Lantern Corps. There would be way more eyes on him at all times, as it would not just be the government wondering what he wants. There is no Cecil Stedman to contend with when there's the likes of Amanda Waller to really focus on, as well as several other governments probably watching out for extraterrestrials. His arrival would line up with the emergence of Superman after all.
I'm from the planet Viltrum. My government sent me here to help protect the people of your world.
Outside of the government, if he were spotted, there would be a never-ending observation of the aforementioned Batman who was always skeptical of anything that could bring harm to the world.
We believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy. We have to take it as an absolute certainty.
If Omni-man were to be in the DC universe, his arrival would have to be quiet and he'd have to assimilate into the world ahead of time somehow, to avoid all prying eyes and to try being one of them without his larger-than-life entrance. Assuming he can keep under the radar and arrive on Earth though, I think Nolan would find himself integrating into the modern age of heroes. Omni-man would still exist, but the field of characters he plays in wouldn't be as easy to topple. Omni-man's initial arc of someone living on Earth and then eventually having to conquer, it would see a definite shift. In the Invincible universe, Omni-man was Earth's premier hero for a while, with Nolan splitting his time as a hero and as a husband to Debbie with her son Mark.
I volunteered to relocate to Earth and be its sole protector. That's when I met your mother, and we eventually had you.
In the DC universe, he would still have this opportunity to be a hero to blend in. He could even have a Debbie and a Mark in this run in DC. Omni-Man would be in the fold for all these major milestones like the formation of the Justice League, or the confrontation between Earth's heroes and Darkseid, or Starro, or any major threat like that. He would find himself blending in with the likes of Superman and Wonder Woman as a major powerhouse player. What I'm trying to get at is there's a plethora of DC heroes who could match the level of Omni-Man, as well as threats that would find him fighting side by side with the heroes. He would likely find himself in that similar honorary member status he had with the Guardians.
All that crap he said about the World Betterment Committee. Talk about a fairy tale.
What do we do, sir?
He says he wants to help, so we'll let him help.
Mark Grayson, his son, could very well go on to join something like Young Justice or the Teen Titans when his powers would come in. Assuming Nolan could fold into Earth seamlessly, he would have the chance to play a hero as he had done in this universe. Instead of having connections with someone like Cecil, he could very well find himself talking to Superman or Wonder Woman, new relationships that would foster different team-ups and different dynamics as Nolan plays his hand at being a pretend good guy while surrounded by Earth's mightiest heroes. The team-ups with the likes of the Justice League, Justice Society, and even more abstract ones like the Legion of Superheroes. However, assuming Viltrum still exists to give us Omni-Man in DC, Nolan would still be on Earth for one purpose: the eventual domination of it.
You don't seem to understand. Earth isn't yours to conquer.
Omni-Man turned on the heroes soon after Mark got his powers in the Invincible comic, making moves to try and conquer Earth. In the DC universe, if Nolan made that kind of motion, I find that he'd have to do so under different circumstances. Nolan in the DC universe would have to contend with the Justice League by the time of his turn and several dozen other heroes who wouldn't stand for his transgression. Trying to trap and take out the League wouldn't pan out considering mind readers like Martian Manhunter may see something like that coming.
I've realized I have a stake in this world, and it's time I started fighting for it.
Even if Nolan could contend with most of the League in a fight, it would boil down to if he could take out Superman. Realistically, the answer is no. Nolan would have to fight several members and Superman, and for Omni-Man, that is a losing effort. There are points in DC history where Nolan could make his play and not have to worry about the Man of Tomorrow. If Nolan wasn't worried about Mark getting his powers, he would have the chance to make an attempt to conquer Earth, sometime after the death of Superman. If Clark were off the table, we would see Nolan strike while the hero's morale is low and Earth's mightiest hero is off the field. However, this is unlikely because of his wait to see if Mark would grow up to get his powers.
Guess who's finally getting his powers?
Are you sure? Oh, that's great.
As well, even with a low morale, Nolan would lose to the sheer number of heroes. Viltrumites are proud, so I don't see him teaming up with the villains to get his work done. The other option sees a later in the timeline chance for Nolan to strike while Superman is on Warworld and his son John Kent is the active Superman. This period of time sees an inexperienced Superman surrounded by what heroes were currently active. Though by this point there were quite a number of heroes, so Omni-Man odds are questionable. Either way, his attempt to conquer Earth would more likely end in his capture than it would a conversation with Mark. Omni-Man's big swing and turn would not play out how it did with Invincible, as I think he'd see himself either imprisoned by the League or handed over to the government. Nolan wouldn't be kept down for long though. Omni-Man's redemption in the DC universe would pan out radically different from Invincible. I look to the reboot arc from Invincible as a basis for this next part, but I think his reformation would play out like that. Capturing Omni-Man in the reboot arc forced him to come to his senses and understand his love of Earth. There was also his brief stint in a Viltrum prison that helped him understand he loves his wife.
I think I miss my wife.
Omni-Man's loss and capture in the DC universe would help him begin to realize the mistakes he has made. If he didn't kill anyone in his turn on the heroes, there is reason to believe they would give Nolan the chance to reform. They would see where he comes from and understand him. The alternative route that takes though, if it isn't all forgive and forget, is Nolan Grayson on the Suicide Squad. In many ways akin to General Zod's stint on the team, Nolan would end up captured and placed with a squad because they could use the Viltrumite to do some good even if he's already done some bad. They'd find their means to put a bomb in his head and send him on those death run missions. Unlike Zod, Nolan wouldn't have heat vision to remove the bomb from his skull and therefore be stuck in the Suicide Squad position until further notice. Assuming Nolan goes through his usual beats he did in the Invincible comics, the question becomes what would come next? Just because Nolan and by proximity Viltrum makes it into DC doesn't mean he has any of his usual foils. I find that Omni-Man can still do his big points, but after his failed attempt at taking Earth and his eventual run at redemption, where does it leave him? There is of course one major thing. If Nolan exists in DC, I find it safe to assume so does Planet Viltrum, and without a war with Viltrum would never be off the table.
In order for our people to reach their full potential, we had to remove the weak. When it was over, our population was cut in half.
Nolan's people found themselves axed down till there was just around 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites. There's no feasible way they could commit to their plan to go planet by planet and take over. So what did they do? In the DC universe, a lot of things circulate around Earth and only Earth, so Viltrum would most likely wage war on Earth in a crisis. See what I did there? Nolan would play defender of Earth with the rest of the DC universe and hold the fort down against an invasion of the Viltrumites. I think it would definitely deviate in a way compared to the Invincible comics as well. Nolan would play defender, but he'd be forced into a position of teaming up with the people he'd betrayed.
How did a mere moment on Earth turn you into a weak, sentimental traitor?
Getting his second chance from Superman, and perhaps he and Superman teaming up to take down General Thrag. Nolan is still getting that chance to take his position as Grand Regent. Nolan runs as Grand Regent would most likely go a lot differently in the DC universe. If things still played out and Nolan learned he was the rightful ruler of Viltrum, he would still take his place on top. Unlike how things played out in his own comics, his time on top would not end the same way. The biggest difference between his run in the Invincible universe and his time here is Nolan would not die and leave his status as leader to his son, at least not anytime soon. Allow me to explain. With the sheer amount of heroes in the DC universe, a confrontation with Thrag would have played out very similar the first time, with Thrag losing and Omni-Man taking his place. However, there is no specific planet Thrag could go to in DC lore to accumulate an army as fast as he did in the Invincible universe, leaving the former leader to go down a different path to confront Nolan. I say Thrag because it's easiest to just use his name, but in DC, whomever it could be that would confront Nolan, in this case keeping Thrag, they'd have to change tactics. Nolan's Grand Regent stint would see him defend against a possible Red Lantern Thrag, who's angry at being deposed by Omni-Man and who wages that rematch with the leader. Though now with the likes of the League and other heroes on his side, other more coordinated efforts would be in place for a rematch fight, and it would keep Viltrum's favorite son alive and well, to see how the rest of his time in the universe plays out, as Omni-Man would have a longer, more fruitful reign in DC. I may have established how Omni-Man's character would pan out under the DC Universe banner, but it's important to note here that there's a more heavy-handed emphasis on the shared universe of DC. Invincible may have its own other characters like Savage Dragon or Spawn around, but DC has this vast world to play in. Omni-Man may have his own character arc still, but that doesn't take away from the other things he would do. I believe while flying the Omni-Man banner, there would be teaming ups with the likes of Superman or Batman. Omni-Man in the Suicide Squad as mentioned earlier, considering his actions and betrayal. The dynamics presented outside of his own story are just as important because when push comes to shove, I think Omni-Man would find himself in the Justice League, even if it's as temporary replacement for a Kryptonian.
He's back.
Even still, his crossovers with Superman would see the question of could he win in an arm wrestling match and the fun stuff like that can be achieved in a shared universe. I think Omni-Man would become that key player or even a background piece in those major DC comic events. His war with Viltrumites would even still be its own event, with other heroes having to face various Viltrumites. There's a lot of opportunity with Omni-Man in the world outside of his own stories, and there's a lot of change.
Desertion. Unapproved breeding. Murder.
Maybe during reign of the Superman, he would have been one to adorn the S in honor of the dead Man of Steel. I think he would thrive in the universe, and the potential he offers is second to none. When it is all said and done, if Omni-Man were to be in a DC universe, there is no reason he wouldn't fit like a glove into this world. His Viltrumites would join a plethora of other aliens like the Kryptonians or even the Daxamites. He would be able to go for the same goals that his initial character arc in Invincible set up to do. There would be a chance for a similar arc, and he'd have legendary team-ups. Omni-Man and Superman taking offense against a powerhouse together, or Omni-Man turning to Batman to get his help in solving an investigation. Omni-Man would survive and thrive as Regent more likely than not, unlike his Invincible run. If you enjoyed this video and want to see what if Batman was in the Invincible universe, click the video on the screen.